We will win re-election. There is too much at stake, and the American people know it.
Welcome back to America Decides. That was Vice President Kamala Harris on Face the Nation last weekend. Today, Washington Post columnist David Ignatius called for President Biden not to run again in 2024. After praising the administration's accomplishments, Ignatius wrote, quote, "I don't think Biden and Vice President Harris should run for re-election. I think Biden risks undoing his greatest achievement, which was stopping Trump." Leslie Sanchez and Chuck Rocha join us now. Leslie is a CBS News political analyst and a Republican strategist who served in the George W. Bush administration. Chuck is a Democratic strategist and the president of Solidarity Strategies. He previously served as a senior advisor for Bernie Sanders in the 2020 campaign. Chuck, I want to start with you on this. David Ignatius is a significant figure in Washington. He is well connected in both parties, but particularly among Democrats, and his voice matters in at least the cocktail party circuit of Washington, D.C., which isn't as powerful as it used to be, but it is not without influence. How do you regard his column today, and what effect do you think it'll have on the Democratic conversation about the Biden re-elect campaign?
Well, there has been a conversation, but that was 6 months ago about what would really happen at the White House, because then you had time to do something as a Democratic Party. We could figure out, are we staying with the horse that got us here, or are we going to change horse in the middle of this stream? And the decision was made, and it's a little late now for this conversation to be had. Look, Joe Biden is getting older. We all know that. But the other guy who's going to probably be running against Donald Trump is getting older, too. And in focus groups that I'm doing, old and steady still beats old and crazy in what we're doing every day.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think David would do this, knowing, as you know, he knows that this is largely a decision that's already been made? Do you think he is speaking for some Democratic constituency, or just sort of putting a marker down in case things go south and he can say, hey, don't blame me, I told you?
I think that's a part of it. I mean, there's one thing about Democrats is it's organized chaos almost all the time. And there's lots of folks you can't keep happy and that probably aren't happy with Joe Biden. But Joe Biden got us here. The American people voted for something different than Donald Trump. And I think what Ignatius is doing is positioning himself to say, look, I said this early on, so y'all can't be blaming me.
Right. From an analytical perspective, I'm not suggesting that David Ignatius is a partisan, but just from an analytical perspective. That's all I'm saying. Leslie Sanchez, on the Republican side, there was news today. Mitt Romney not running for re-election and saying that he thinks a younger generation needs to step up. He referred to that at I think a press avail or in his video announcement. Let's go to that side if we can.
I considered my age and the fact that at the end of a second term, I would be in my mid-80s. And I think it's time for guys like me to get out of the way and have people in the next generation step forward, because they're going to be shaping the world they're going to be living in.
That was an impromptu meeting with reporters, otherwise known in Washington as a scrum. Leslie, what's the import of this?
You know, the interesting thing about Senator Romney is he's always been somebody who's very principled. He stands and fundamentally takes those hard lines in positions he believes in. He does. I think anybody would argue and agree. He really believes that, and he's trying to set an example not just for Republicans, but certainly for the topic we're talking about, for the Democrats. Is this a cascading effect? I think the question that wasn't asked to my colleague, my friend here, Chuck, is it the tip of the iceberg when you're talking about the impact of age? Certainly with President Biden. And Republicans, Nikki Haley on the presidential campaign has been talking about that.
Just about it every day.
Every day, because it is becoming a clearer point in these focus groups. It's a clear point of contention in the back of voters' minds.
When Romney was asked, the senator was asked about his position in the Republican Party, he said it's a small position right now. The party is controlled by Donald Trump, which he said is the demagogue portion of the Republican Party. He says he represents the wise wing that he hopes will have, at some point in the future, maybe distant, a re-emergence. Where is the Republican Party absent Mitt Romney now?
I think a lot of people think that part of the Republican Party, even going back to Reagan, we heard a lot about former President Ronald Reagan, the Reagan generation, the impact of the Reagan generation, where there were so many people that came to run and stood on his shoulders as a Reagan conservative. You can't say that there's a large group of Trump populists, a Trump New Republican Party. There's not those lanes yet, but I increasingly believe that part of the Republican Party is more of a footnote. It's going to be in our recent history.
The Reagan part?
Look.
Oh, the Trump part?
I would say where Romney is, the establishment party, the big business, a big industry, Northeastern Republicans. Yeah, very much so. Very
That's
much
probably
so.
why he couldn't win his primary, and that's another reason why he's probably
Could be
retired.
his primary. And it's so interesting because if you talk to, just real quick, you talk to voters and they say, oh, you know, Trump has, if you're looking at Trump and looking at a Romney, there is not a lane for a Romney type of Republican. They want an alternative.
Chuck, I want to ask you about a conversation that Democrats are having pretty much in the open right now, which is, one, poll numbers for Biden are worrisome and the sky might be close to falling. And then there's others like, calm down, he's fine. Actually, the underlying numbers, if you dig a little deeper, Jim Messina is certainly there, a very prominent voice in the Obama campaign and reelection campaign, said, don't worry about it. On which side of that ledger do you fall?
I've been running campaigns for 34 years, and I'd say I'm a little bit of both. As a Democrat, I get up worried every single day.
Right, but that's a given. But I mean, particularly with Biden and what you see in the data right now.
What's changed from 15 years ago, 20 years ago, is this partisan divide that you just described within your own party and within my party. People have run to their corners, and there's such little bit of America left in the middle that's undecided in just a handful of states, Major. You've been out on the road in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada. This whole thing will be decided in 5 states. And guess what? It's 50-50 partisanship in either state and such a small sliver. That's why we talk about Latino voters, black voters. If you don't get the exact same percentage that you got 4 years ago, if it drops off a percentage, every little percentage will matter. Hence why I wake up worried every day.
And to that point, I'm not trying to stump you, but if this stumps you, I'll be happy. Name me a state that Biden won in 2020 you think he could lose, and one he narrowly lost you think he could win.
I think he could win North Carolina. I think you could easily lose Wisconsin.
Leslie, same question for you about Trump or the Republican nominee. Let's assume it's Trump, but if not, a Republican, 2020, they lose one that they won and they gain one they lost.
The challenge, and I want to be fair because I was thinking about this question consistently. The challenge, Major, is we're increasingly seeing a lot of these working class voters who identify as Democrats, but increasingly don't like or feel that the Democratic Party has abandoned them. That's the old Reagan line. You feel you're doing better now than you were before. Because you have a lot of voters who don't necessarily register on the vote, Latino voters being the same. They may be Democratic. We're going in the field right now, Democratic, they consider themselves self-identified Democrats, but who would vote for Trump over again in a state like Texas. They would like an alternative that is somebody not favorable to DeSantis, but they're looking for an alternative, and they're not going to be siding with the traditional Democratic Party.
So, do you have 2 states?
I would say I wouldn't put.
Do you think Trump could lose North Carolina?
I don't think at all. I don't think so. I think North Carolina is strong. I think.
Is there one he could win back that he lost?
I think we could be more competitive in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. All right. Leslie Sanchez, Chuck Rocha, good to have you with us. Thanks so very much.